Prime Minister Carney will travel to Turkey in 10 days for the NATO summit. Carney says U.S. President Donald Trump called him this week in advance of that meeting, and the Prime Minister was asked whether the President is satisfied with Canada's defense spending or if he still considers Canada a freeloader.
Canada is pulling its weight now in NATO. There's more to do, without question, but we have moved to meet the 2% target, as you know. We already meet the 1.5% target for defense resilience, defense industrial. We have a track to getting overall 4% by the end of this decade. We have some major procurement decisions. We just made one on global eye surveillance. We have others coming up. Submarines is an obvious one. And we're building out our infrastructure in the Arctic.
Joining me now is Janne Kuusela. He is the Permanent Secretary of Finland's Ministry of Defense, the equivalent of the Deputy Minister here in Canada. Mr. Kuusela, it's good to meet you. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start, if I can, with a big change in Finland when it comes to nuclear weapons. It was earlier this month voted to overturn a Cold War ban on nuclear weapons on Finnish soil. Is this because of the changing security nature in Europe with the war in Ukraine, the decision to join NATO? How did that decision come to be?
Well, the most important thing is that we joined a nuclear alliance. So this whole nuclear deterrence is a new thing for Finland, and it's a very important part of NATO's deterrence and defense. So basically, our legislation was not designed for an allied country. So we have had to change our legislation from many sides. I mean, including how we can use our personnel in NATO's missions and operations abroad. How do we function as a host nation for allied forces and troops in Finland, and also how we deal with the nuclear weapons. And the law we had kind of basically prohibited the full implementation of NATO's nuclear deterrence in our part of the Europe, and we decided to change that law.
Okay, so it's a consequence, really, of the need to modernize your legal framework so
Yes.
that you could be a full participant in the NATO alliance. It doesn't mean we're going to have nuclear weapons on Finnish soil, because I know a lot of countries are now looking at maybe coming under the French nuclear deterrent as a result of what's happened with Russia.
No, the nuclear weapons are not going to come to Finnish soil. That's not the issue.
Okay. So you're here in Canada, a fellow northern country, Arctic sovereignty, Arctic security, obviously core functions or core priorities of the various governments. I mean, how are Finland and Canada working together on that as part of the northern flank of NATO?
Well, we are really close allies, and I'm really happy to say allies since the last 3 years. And I gotta start by saying that Canada really hit our radar screen in security and defense when after Russia invaded Crimea, Canada took over the forward land forces lead in Latvia. And that really made a difference in our region to the positive. I mean, Canada really projected stability in the Baltic Sea, and in our eyes, Canada became a Baltic Sea power and a NATO's eastern flank power. Then, of course, I mean, needless to say, we two countries share a lot of common in the Arctic dimension, and what does Arctic mean for requirements for security and defense. So we share a lot in common. We are really like-minded, so I find it really easy and productive to work with my Canadian colleagues. And we are both now investing a lot in our defense systems, and it only makes sense to cooperate while you're doing it.
Canada's really playing catch up on that, right? We've just moving through the process of building out some big infrastructure on roads to, freedom of movement, but dual use of for military capacities in the north. Russia has built out its Arctic quite substantially over the last number of decades. I mean, how much work does NATO need to do to sort of match the ambitions of Russia, of China in that particular part of the world?
Well, I would say that we are on the right track. We have a clear understanding what is needed, and now we are getting there. What we need to do is stay on course, keep on investing in defense, and do more together in Europe, over the Atlantic. We need to cooperate in this. And I mean, we have also in Finland, you mentioned military mobility. We have a fair bit of doing that as well to make sure that we have a road and railway infra that supports defensive actions.
Well, you of course have you share a big border with Russia. And one of the concerns I've heard from speaking to diplomats and officials in NATO countries is that with things seemingly turning against Russia to some degree in Ukraine at this point, we could see them maybe test the NATO alliance, either with Finland or in Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania. What is Finland's thoughts on that? Do you see the potential of Putin trying to test the resolve of NATO on other fronts if Ukraine keeps going the way it may be going?
Well, I would say the bottom line is that it really depends on us. If we stay united, if we hold the ranks, and if we keep on investing on our defense, we'll be fine. Russia wouldn't try to challenge us if we do all of that. So it's really for us to prevail or fail this really important issue. And we are focusing, of course, on our own doing. So we are really always been focused on having robust national defense, and now it's part of NATO's collective defense system in Northeastern Europe. But we do realize that we oftentimes talk about NATO's Article 5, the collective defense clause, but we think the Article 3 is even more important, which says that each NATO nation should be able to take care of its own defense in the first hand. Then the allies support and help each other. And we think that without Article 3, there is no really Article 5. So it translates to it that we have a lot to do. Many countries in Europe are doing the catching up, and it's a hard road to take. But we need to do it, and as I said, I think we are all in a good direction in that sense.
Well, Canada has just gotten to the 2%, and they say we're on track to get to the 3.5% on direct military spend, and then I guess the other 1.5% on related, maybe dual purpose things that would get to 5%. But when all of the NATO allies get to that level, Prime Minister Carney has talked here that it's going to squeeze out spending ability on other things, and countries are going to have to make some hard choices. Do you think the citizens of the NATO countries are prepared for that? Because when we all get to 5%, that is trillions and trillions of dollars each and every year on defense at the expense of other things. There is going to be some trade-offs across NATO societies.
Absolutely, and maybe I'll take a couple of things which we kind of emphasize in Finland in this context. One is that it's our duty in the defense side to tell the requirements, what do we really need as a minimum level to have a robust defense capability collectively, and then it's up to the political decision makers to kind of do the maths that how much does our economies and societies bear at any given time. I think people understand when you tell it in a sober and realistic tone that what the situation is, and people do understand that things like freedom and democracy cannot be taken for granted. They can be taken away from you if your defenses are not in place, and then you have nothing left in your society. So there's a lot of understanding, but we need to balance this so that, for example, in Finland, we need to also have enough services for the people so that nobody's left behind. Because our defense is resting on the fact that the people of Finland are strongly willing to defend the country.
Right.
And I always say that as long as different kinds of Finnish people in different parts of our large country really feel that this is my Finland and I want to defend this and will be fine. So this needs to be taken into account when we do the balancing of how much we can spend on defense at any given time. But it's not so much about how high the top line might go, it's also how clever we are in spending and how much we manage to do cooperation in creating the capabilities we need. So we also need to be creative here and kind of make the most of our resources and keep the course. What we don't need to do is U-turns in our defense investment.
Right.
It doesn't have to be sharp increase, but it should be steady and predictable, and then we can work on a long term to spend the taxpayers' dollars or euros effectively, which we feel this burden really heavy on the defense side, that there's a very little margin for error in this endeavor.
Yeah, and one of the hard lessons of Ukraine was the inability to supply them because of diminished and weakened industrial capacity across the alliance. Just as a quick final point, Secretary Kuusela, July 6th, 7th, 8th, right around then, the NATO countries will gather in Ankara for the next summit. Mark Rutte, the Secretary General, has teased the idea of billions of big procurement announcements being announced as this arming up process continues. What do you expect we'll see in a couple of weeks when they all gather in Turkey?
Well, I do hope that it will be a show of unity and resolve, and I think we have a good story to tell. First of all, I have to say it from the outset that I do agree with President Trump's administration that Europe needs to take much more responsibility on its own security. He's right in saying that. It's about the time we do it. But now I think we are beyond that problem. We are in the right direction. We are doing things. So we have a positive story unfolding here, which I think merits to be told in Ankara, and the industrial side you mentioned is a big part of that. So there will be kind of announcements of major deals and projects which are taking us forward on the right path. I do hope that there will be also a solid backing for continuous support to Ukraine, which is very important to have a clear understanding on that issue.
Yeah, there was certainly a consensus there in a positive direction at the G7, where America was much stronger than it's been in recent times. Janne Kuusela, Permanent Secretary at Finland's Ministry of Defense. It was good to meet you, sir. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much.